When he came to Egypt, he quickly invaded and took over the coastal city, the great ancient capital of Alexandria. And then, as he began to march his army south towards the pyramids, he found that they began to be quite disgruntled. It was, after all, the desert. It was, after all, some of the hottest seasons of the year. And so he sat his army down there at the pyramids, had watermelons grown locally there in Egypt brought to his army, a rare treat for the people of France at that time. And at this point, he saw the Egyptian forces of the Mamelukes, that was the power at the time, coming to challenge him. And so he simply invited their cavalry to come against his forces, who, having fed on the watermelon, now formed their various formations. He set up his cannon fire, and he had such superior numbers and position and artillery that he simply mowed down the Egyptian attack of their cavalry, who did not have his tactics, who were not equipped with the advanced weaponry that the French actually had. It was an enormous victory called the Battle of the Pyramids. In fact, the Egyptians who fought against him, it was estimated, lost at least 10,000 soldiers. The French estimated that they actually didn't estimate, they counted. They lost 29. That's how lopsided this actual victory was. From there, he then traveled to the great capital of Egypt, Cairo, and he proclaimed himself not only the one who was going to rule Egypt, but he called himself now the protector of Islam, who had conquered the last remaining crusaders in Malta. This shows you Napoleon's real loyalties. He didn't really believe in Islam. He wasn't really devoted to Islam. He simply knew that if he called himself the protector of Islam, he could possibly unite all the Islamic peoples of this part of the world, and they would unite under him, which would give him greater power. That was his end game. He also, at this time, set up the Egyptian Institute. This is where many of those scholars would work, studying the history and the language of Egypt, studying the natural things that they found in Egypt as well. But of course, their most famous discovery was the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone ultimately proved to be the key to our understanding of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Prior to its discovery and its deciphering, we could not read hieroglyphics. But because there was a passage written in ancient hieroglyphics on this stone, and the same passage was also written in ancient Greek, which we could understand, scholars were able to decipher how hieroglyphics worked. It took 20 plus years to do this, but still, the Rosetta Stone was the key to this. At this point, Napoleon then planned a gutsy invasion by sea against Syria. He planned to conquer Syria and Egypt and then move from those two places towards Jerusalem and Palestine. But at this point, things did not really go as planned. The British surprised his fleet there at the mouth of the Nile and managed to destroy most of the French fleet. Meaning that Napoleon and his men now had no protection by sea. They now had no easy way to get supplies from Europe across sea. They also had no escape by sea. At this time, his men also suffered great disease. Sandstorms came in record numbers that year, and he failed to take the great city of Acre, a city that had been largely reinforced by the Crusaders with massive walls. So Napoleon, realizing that all of these things had gone not according to his plan to take over Alexander's empire in a mere 4 months, decided the only sensible thing to do was to head home. He managed to, of course, find a ship to take him home quickly, but he had no fleet to take his army, so that meant his army was on his own. Some of them made it back to France. Many of them did not. They died somewhere in the desert or somewhere on the way back home. But still, what's amazing about this is his men always loved him. In fact, the men who served with him in Egypt, especially the ones that survived, that is, remained faithful. They became his veterans. They became known literally as the Old Guard or the Imperial Guard. They became his best soldiers, his crack troops, which he only ever used in great times of desperation. Remember that. It'll come up again when we talk about his last great battle.